"Don't throw away my lunch," she whispered. The CEO opened it after she left. The headquarters of Hayes Logistics was almost silent. Most of the lights had already been turned off. The elevators chimed only once every few minutes. Outside, the Arizona sunset painted the glass towers of downtown Phoenix in shades of orange and gold. Inside the executive floor, Michael Hayes was still working. He always was. At 35, the CEO had built a reputation for being the first to arrive and the last to leave. His employees respected him. Some admired him. Most were simply afraid of him. A quiet knock interrupted the silence. Before Michael could answer, the office door swung open. A young woman hurried inside, slightly out of breath. Her cheeks were flushed from running. Her eyes searched the room desperately until they landed on a simple gray lunchbox sitting on the corner of his desk. Relief flashed across her face, then panic. She stepped forward but stopped herself. Her voice dropped to almost a whisper. "Please," she swallowed. "Please don't throw away my lunch." Michael looked up from his laptop for the first time. The young receptionist from downstairs. Vera Carter. She lowered her eyes immediately. I'll come back for it." Her fingers tightened around the strap of her bag. She hesitated. "Please don't open it." Before Michael could ask why, she turned around and hurried out of the office. The door clicked shut behind her. Silence returned. Michael glanced at the forgotten lunchbox. Plain gray fabric, slightly worn. Nothing remarkable. He returned to his work. At least he tried to. An hour passed. The building was now completely empty. His eyes drifted toward the lunchbox again. Why would someone care so much if another person opened it? Curiosity was not one of Michael Hayes' usual weaknesses. Tonight, it won. He reached across the desk and slowly unzipped the bag. Inside sat half of a neatly wrapped turkey sandwich, one apple, a reusable water bottle, and beneath them, a folded piece of paper. Michael unfolded it carefully. The first line made him stop breathing for a moment. "Mom, I'm sorry today wasn't enough again." His eyes moved to the next lines. The silence inside the office suddenly felt much heavier than before. What exactly had Vera been hiding inside an ordinary lunchbox, and why had she begged a stranger not to look? No one at Hayes Logistics could remember exactly when Michael Hayes had become intimidating. Some said it happened after he became CEO at 32. Others believed he had simply been born with the ability to silence an entire conference room by walking through the door. He rarely raised his voice. He didn't need to. One disappointed look from Michael Hayes usually accomplished far more. Meetings started exactly on time. Reports were expected without excuses. Mistakes were corrected professionally, but never forgotten. That was why every employee instinctively straightened their posture whenever the elevator doors opened and Michael stepped inside. He wasn't cruel, just impossible to impress. Which made Vera Carter's first morning particularly memorable. Within 20 minutes of arriving, she spilled an entire cup of coffee. Unfortunately, it happened to be her own. She gasped as the cup slipped from her hands and splashed across the reception counter. "I'm so sorry," the security guard laughed. "Pretty sure the coffee isn't going to file a complaint." Her face turned bright red. 5 minutes later, she stepped into an elevator, pressed the button for the lobby, then spent nearly a minute wondering why the elevator kept going up. She had accidentally pressed the button for the executive floor. The doors opened. Michael Hayes was standing outside, waiting. Vera froze. "Oh," she jumped backward. "This isn't where I'm supposed to exist." Michael looked at the control panel, then at her. "No, it isn't." He stepped inside without another word. The elevator descended in complete silence. Vera stared very hard at the floor. By lunchtime, she had managed to survive without creating another disaster, or so she thought. At 2 o'clock, she was asked to update the digital welcome board outside the conference room. She typed confidently, "Welcome, Michelle Hayes." She stared at it proudly. Perfect. The marketing manager walked by, stopped, looked at the screen, looked at Vera. "Who's Michelle Hayes?" Vera blinked, then slowly looked back at the display. "I would like to resign." The manager burst into laughter. "No, you'll just fix the spelling." Across the hallway, Michael happened to notice the commotion. His eyes drifted toward the screen, then toward the horrified young receptionist. For one brief second, The corner of his mouth almost moved. Almost. He simply walked away. Vera let out a long breath. Okay, I'll count that as not getting fired. The day finally ended. Employees packed their bags and hurried toward the elevators. Vera did the opposite. She climbed the stairs to the rooftop carrying her small lunchbox. The Arizona evening breeze was warm. She sat alone on a bench overlooking downtown Phoenix. Only then did she open the lunchbox. Half a sandwich. An apple. Exactly what she had packed before sunrise. Before she could take a bite, her phone rang. Phoenix Memorial Hospital. Her smile disappeared. She answered immediately. Hello. The nurse spoke gently. Mrs. Carter's dialysis schedule had changed. There were additional treatment costs. Insurance would cover most of it, but not everything. Vera closed her eyes. I understand. She thanked the nurse before ending the call. For several seconds, she simply stared at the sandwich in her hands. Then she wrapped it again, untouched. She placed the apple back inside, locked the lunchbox. Quietly whispered to herself, Mom likes chicken. She checked the balance in her banking app. $12. Exactly 12. She opened the calculator, subtracted bus fare, electricity, medication. There wasn't enough. Not this week. Not if she bought lunch tomorrow. A tiny smile appeared anyway. It's okay. I'll eat later. She knew she wouldn't. By the time she returned downstairs, exhaustion had settled into every part of her body. She gathered her paperwork, answered one last email, locked the reception desk, and finally left the building. Halfway to the bus stop, she stopped walking. The lunchbox. She had left it upstairs. Her heart nearly stopped. She turned and ran all the way back. The executive floor was almost empty. Only one office still had its lights on. Michael's. She hurried inside, breathing hard, eyes fixed on the gray lunchbox resting on the corner of his desk. Please don't throw away my lunch. She forced a small smile. I'll come back for it. Just, please don't open it. Then she fled before embarrassment could catch her. Michael watched the closed door for several moments. Something about her voice had sounded different. Not embarrassed, afraid. He looked down at the lunchbox. Eventually, he opened it. Inside was exactly what he expected. Half a sandwich, one apple, one folded paper. He unfolded it. It wasn't a letter. It was a handwritten budget. Remaining balance, $12 medication, electric bill, bus pass, dialysis copay. Every dollar had been assigned, every expense carefully calculated. At the very bottom, one final sentence, written smaller than all the others, almost like she hoped no one would notice. If I skip lunch, Mom can eat chicken tonight. Michael stared at the page. His hands remained completely still. For the first time in years, the numbers on his laptop screen no longer mattered. The quarterly reports, the contracts, the profit projections, none of them. He slowly folded the paper again, closed the lunchbox, and sat alone in the silent office long after midnight. Unable to return to work. The following morning, Vera arrived before anyone else. She expected an empty desk, or perhaps an awkward conversation with the CEO. Instead, her gray lunchbox was sitting exactly where she had left her bag. She frowned. Someone had returned it. She slowly unzipped the zipper. Everything looked the same, until she looked closer. There was something inside that definitely hadn't been there yesterday. Vera looked around the reception desk before carefully opening her lunchbox. She frowned. Something was different. The sandwich and apple was still there. The folded budget sheet was exactly where she had hidden it, but tucked neatly beside everything else was a banana, a small carton of milk, and a blueberry muffin. She blinked, then blinked again. What? She looked under the desk, inside the drawers, even behind the reception counter, as if someone might still be hiding there. No one. She hurried to the janitor's closet just as Mr. Alvarez was changing the trash bags. Excuse me. The elderly janitor smiled. Morning, Miss Carter. Did you? She lifted the lunchbox slightly. Put food in here? Mr. Alvarez laughed. I wish I were that generous. No, I only throw things away. Vera looked down at the lunchbox again. If it wasn't you, then who? She decided not to eat the extra food immediately. Instead, she carried everything home that evening. When she opened the lunchbox in her mother's apartment, Mrs. Carter smiled. Someone packed too much. Vera carefully placed the banana beside her mother's dinner tray. I think somebody made a mistake. Her mother raised an eyebrow. Or somebody noticed. Vera shook her head. Nobody notices receptionists. Mrs. Carter smiled knowingly. You'd be surprised. The next morning, it happened again. This time, a yogurt and an orange. Another muffin. No note. No explanation. No name. Vera walked through every floor of the building holding the lunchbox like evidence in a mystery. Nothing. On Wednesday, a granola bar appeared. Thursday, a bottle of orange juice. Friday, fresh strawberries. Always healthy, always neatly packed, always anonymous. People began noticing, especially because Vera spent several minutes every morning staring into her lunchbox with complete confusion. By the following week, the entire reception area had developed theories. I think you've got a secret admirer, one accountant announced. No, another replied. A secret nutritionist. The HR assistant leaned across the counter dramatically. What if it's the handsome guy from IT? The one with the beard? The one who fixes printers? Vera laughed. He barely remembers my name. Exactly. Classic romance. Another coworker joined in. I vote for building maintenance. They're practical. They believe in potassium. Everyone laughed. Vera covered her face. Can we please stop discussing mystery bananas? At that exact moment, Michael Hayes walked through the lobby. The conversation died instantly. Someone whispered, "Good morning, Mr. Hayes." Michael nodded politely. His eyes drifted toward the lunchbox sitting open on Vera's desk. He noticed the banana, the milk, the confusion on Vera's face. Then he continued walking as though he had seen absolutely nothing. Behind him, the receptionist from accounting whispered, "I wonder if Mr. Hayes has ever eaten a muffin." Another employee answered, "I honestly don't think he experiences joy." Vera tried very hard not to laugh. The mystery continued, and so did Michael's quiet observations. Without meaning to, he began noticing things. Every morning, Vera arrived 10 minutes early. Not once had he seen her buy coffee from the cafe downstairs. Everyone else carried expensive drinks. She carried a reusable water bottle. At lunch, she always ate slowly. Never the entire meal. Half the sandwich disappeared. The other half went back into the lunchbox. The fruit stayed untouched. The extra food disappeared, but never inside the office. One evening, Michael happened to leave later than usual. From the parking garage, he saw Vera waiting for the bus. She opened the lunchbox, wrapped the untouched fruit carefully inside another small paper bag, then smiled when an elderly homeless woman sitting nearby accepted it. The woman hugged her. Vera simply waved and boarded her bus. Michael remained standing beside his car. She wasn't saving the food for herself. She never had been. The following Tuesday, Michael had an early executive meeting. As he walked past the employee break room, he slowed. The lights were still on. Inside, Vera had fallen asleep at the table. Her head rested on folded arms. One hand still held several hospital invoices, a calculator, and a pen. Numbers had been crossed out repeatedly. Dialysis, medication, transportation. Every calculation ended the same way. Not enough. Michael quietly stepped inside. A strand of hair had fallen across Vera's face. She looked impossibly young. Not like someone who should already know the price of choosing between groceries and medical treatment. He carefully placed a light blanket from the break room sofa over her shoulders. She didn't wake. As he turned to leave, one invoice slipped from her hand onto the floor. Michael instinctively picked it up. The balance due was far larger than he expected. His chest tightened. He placed the paper back exactly where it had been, then left without making a sound. That afternoon, Michael made several phone calls. Not as CEO, simply as someone who had quietly decided to help. By the end of the day, the company cafeteria received new instructions. Every meal purchased under Vera Carter's employee ID would now be free. The account name would display only one word: anonymous. Michael never intended for her to know. He certainly never expected what happened next. The following morning, HR called Vera downstairs. "There seems to be a company benefit attached to your account," the HR manager explained. "You can have breakfast and lunch here every day. Completely free." Vera looked genuinely confused. There must be a mistake. We checked twice. It's under your employee profile. She stared at the form for a long moment, then quietly pushed it back across the desk. I can't accept this. The HR manager blinked. Why not? Vera smiled politely. Because someone here probably needs it more than I do. If the company wants to help someone, please give it to them instead. She thanked the manager, then walked away. She never even stepped into the cafeteria. Standing just outside the partially open office door, Michael had heard every word. He remained there after she disappeared down the hallway. For a moment, he simply looked at the floor. Then, almost without realizing it, he smiled. The first genuine smile his executive assistant had seen in years. Later that afternoon, Michael was reviewing staffing reports when one folder caught his attention. It wasn't supposed to be on his desk. Someone from Human Resources had accidentally included it with the executive paperwork. Employee request forms. One page had a familiar name, Vera Carter. He frowned. His eyes moved to the subject line. Voluntary resignation request. Michael slowly looked up from the document. Why would she leave now? And what had happened that she still hadn't told anyone? Michael read the resignation request twice, then a third time. The date was today's, effective immediately. No complaint, no explanation, just one sentence. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. He closed the folder. For reasons he couldn't quite explain, it bothered him, more than it should have. Later that afternoon, Vera received an unexpected message. Mr. Hayes would like to see you in his office. Her stomach tightened. She knocked softly. Come in. Michael was standing by the window overlooking downtown Phoenix. He didn't immediately mention the resignation. Instead, he asked, How are you settling in? Vera smiled politely. I'm still learning. I've noticed. She laughed nervously. I promise I won't misspell your name again. For the first time, Michael's expression softened. I wasn't worried about the spelling. Silence settled between them. Finally, he placed the resignation form on his desk. I received this by accident. Vera's smile faded. I see. Is there something wrong here? She looked down. No. Then why resign? She hesitated only a second. I found another opportunity. Better pay? She nodded. I hope so. What kind of job? A different office. The answer came too quickly, too perfectly. Michael knew she was lying, but he didn't expose it. Instead, he simply nodded. If that's your decision, I won't stand in your way. Thank you, Mr. Hayes. She stood, turned, left quietly. The office suddenly felt much larger than before. 3 evenings later, Michael was driving home after meeting a client across town. A red traffic light forced him to stop near an old neighborhood diner. The bright neon sign flickered. Sunset Diner, his eyes wandered toward the windows. Then he froze. Vera. She hurried between tables wearing a blue apron instead of office clothes. Her hair was tied into a loose ponytail. She balanced 3 plates at once. A little boy accidentally bumped into her. She spun just in time, only to send an entire bottle of ketchup sliding across the counter. It tipped over dramatically. Red ketchup splashed everywhere. The customers laughed. Vera covered her face. Oh no, not again. Michael couldn't help smiling. Apparently, gravity really did like her. Without thinking, he parked the car. A few minutes later, he walked inside. The hostess led him to a booth. Vera approached carrying a menu. She didn't notice him at first. Welcome to Sunset Dinner. She stopped. Her eyes widened. Mr. Hayes, I didn't know you served dinner after executive meetings. Michael folded the menu. I was wondering the same thing about receptionists. Vera laughed awkwardly. I work here at night. Every night. She hesitated. Most nights. Please. She pointed toward another waiter. Don't tell anyone at the office. I won't. She let out a relieved breath. What can I get you? What do you recommend? The pancakes. It's 9 o'clock. I stand by my recommendation. He smiled. I'll trust your professional judgment. 10 minutes later, Vera returned carrying his food. As she reached the table, her elbow lightly bumped the ketchup bottle again. It wobbled. Michael instinctively caught it before it fell. She stared at him. Seriously? Michael placed it back on the table. Well, he smiled. At least today you didn't spill coffee. For half a second, Vera simply looked at him. Then she laughed. A real laugh. The kind that made nearby customers turn to look. I don't think I'll ever recover from that first day. You've improved. Only because gravity has become predictable. Has it? No, she admitted. It still surprises me. The diner became unusually quiet after the dinner rush. Vera refilled Michael's coffee. Neither of them seemed in a hurry anymore. You work here until what time? Michael asked. Midnight. And tomorrow? I'll be at the office by 8. When do you sleep? She shrugged. When Arizona remembers it's not so hot. He knew she was avoiding the real answer. So he asked another question. Is this why you're resigning? This time, she didn't deny it. I need more hours. The diner pays by the shift. The office doesn't. Michael looked at her carefully. Is it because of your mother? Vera lowered her eyes. For several seconds, only the sound of coffee pouring somewhere behind the counter filled the silence. Finally, she nodded. The dialysis isn't enough anymore. She twisted the edge of the coffee pot in her hands. The doctors found a possible kidney match. Michael smiled instinctively. That's wonderful. It is. Her voice trembled. But surgery is expensive. Much more expensive. I've been saving for months. I still don't have enough. She forced a smile. I guess that's why people have 2 jobs. Michael quietly watched her. No, he said softly. People shouldn't have to. For the first time since they met, Michael decided to tell someone the truth about himself. When I was 16, my father got sick. Vera listened without interrupting. He needed treatment we couldn't afford. My mother worked 2 jobs. I worked after school. We kept saying, just one more month, just one more paycheck. He looked down at the untouched pancakes. But illness doesn't wait for payday. His voice became almost a whisper. We lost him. The diner around them seemed to disappear. After that, I promised myself something. If I ever had enough, I would never ignore someone who was quietly going hungry. His eyes met hers. That's why your lunch bothered me. Vera felt tears gathering. You read everything. I did. I'm sorry. Don't be. He shook his head gently. I'm grateful you forgot it. The next morning, Michael asked Vera to come upstairs again. She looked nervous. Instead of resignation papers, a folder waited on his desk. I need an executive assistant. She blinked. What? The position has been vacant for 3 months. The salary is double what you're making now. Flexible hours. Full benefits. I'd like you to take it. For a moment, Vera couldn't even speak. Then she slowly closed the folder. Her eyes were shining. I can't. Michael frowned. Why? She swallowed. Because I don't want you to hire me, because you feel sorry for me. This company deserves the best person for the job. Not the saddest story. Michael answered immediately. I'm offering, because I think you'd grow into it. But you only started believing in me. After you saw that lunchbox. Silence. She gently pushed the folder back across the desk. I've spent my whole life trying to earn what I receive. I don't want my hardest moment to become my biggest qualification. Michael didn't argue. He simply looked at the young woman sitting across from him. She was exhausted, overworked, worried, and somehow still protecting her dignity more fiercely than her future. For reasons he couldn't fully explain, he respected her even more. That evening, Vera's phone rang just as she stepped outside the office. Phoenix Memorial Hospital. She answered immediately. Hello? The transplant coordinator sounded hopeful. Miss Carter, we've found a compatible kidney donor. Vera stopped walking. Her eyes filled instantly. Oh my God. Really? Yes. But, the word hit harder than she expected. There is one condition. The surgery must be confirmed within 3 days. We'll need the required deposit before we can schedule the transplant. The call ended. Vera remained standing on the sidewalk. 3 days. Hope had finally arrived. But so had another impossible bill. And somewhere across the parking lot, Michael watched her lower the phone, realizing that whatever came next would change both of their lives forever. The next 3 days passed faster than Vera thought possible. And yet, not nearly fast enough. She sold her old sedan, the one her father had taught her to drive before he passed away. The buyer handed her the cash. She smiled politely, then cried quietly after he drove away. The following afternoon, she sold her laptop. It wasn't new, The screen flickered every now and then, but it had carried her through college. She packed it into a cardboard box anyway. "It's only a computer," she whispered to herself. "I can always buy another one." She picked up extra shifts at Sunset Diner. One shift became two became three. She worked until after midnight, slept for 4 hours, then reported to Hayes Logistics with the same gentle smile she always wore. No one would have guessed she was counting every dollar in her head. By Friday afternoon, she sat alone at the bus stop. She opened the calculator on her phone. Car, laptop, savings, extra wages. She entered every number twice, then closed her eyes. She was still thousands of dollars short. Michael didn't need anyone to tell him something was wrong. He could see it. Vera had become thinner. The dark circles beneath her eyes had deepened. She smiled just as often, but now it took effort. His first instinct was simple: write a check, pay the hospital, make the problem disappear. He even opened his desk drawer where his personal checkbook was kept. Then, he stopped. He remembered the way Vera had pushed the promotion folder back across his desk. "I don't want my hardest moment to become my biggest qualification." If he simply handed her money, she would refuse. Or worse, she would feel indebted. That wasn't helping. That was rescuing. And somehow, Michael knew Vera deserved better than being rescued. She deserved dignity. That evening, long after everyone had gone home, Michael reviewed company policy manuals he hadn't touched in years. Human resources, employee wellness, medical benefits, emergency assistance program. His eyes paused. There it was, the Hayes Employee Emergency Relief Fund, created years earlier by the company's founder, rarely used, almost forgotten. Employees facing serious medical emergencies could receive financial assistance, but there was one condition: the application could not be submitted by management. It had to be initiated and supported by fellow employees. Michael slowly leaned back in his chair. A small smile appeared. Money wasn't the answer. People were. The next morning, Michael called the HR director into his office. "I have a question. About the relief fund." The director nodded. "We haven't used it in almost 4 years. What are the requirements?" "An employee nomination, multiple supporting signatures, and a review committee." Michael nodded thoughtfully. "What if the committee approves?" "The fund covers emergency medical expenses, up to the available balance." Michael stood. "Good." He picked up his jacket. "I won't be signing anything." The HR director looked confused. "Sir?" Michael simply smiled. "I won't have to." The first person to hear about Vera's situation wasn't an executive. It was Mr. Alvarez, the elderly janitor. He quietly listened as HR explained the emergency fund. Without asking a single question, he reached for the nomination form. "I'll sign first." He adjusted his glasses, then wrote his name carefully. "I've watched that young lady leave apples for homeless folks. I've seen her stay late to help people find their lost keys. If anyone deserves a little kindness, it's her." By lunchtime, word had spread. The accountant who joked about mystery bananas signed. The IT technician signed. The receptionist from marketing signed. The warehouse supervisor signed. Even employees who had never spoken to Vera before quietly added their names, one after another. Nobody made a speech. Nobody asked for recognition. They simply signed. By the end of the day, the nomination page was full. A second page had to be printed, then a third. HR finally called Vera upstairs. She stepped into the conference room. Everyone was waiting. She looked around in confusion. "Did I forget another meeting?" The marketing manager smiled. "No, this one's for you." The HR director handed her the paperwork. Vera stared at the first page, then the second, then the third. Dozens of signatures, friends, co-workers, people whose coffee orders she remembered, people she had only greeted in the elevator. Tears blurred the names. I don't understand." Mr. Alvarez stepped forward. "You never asked us for help, so we decided not to wait." Vera pressed both hands over her mouth. She couldn't stop crying. She had spent months believing she was invisible. She had been wrong, very wrong. 2 days later, the review committee reached its decision. The application had been approved. Everyone celebrated, until accounting finished reviewing the numbers. The fund wasn't large enough. It would cover most of the hospital deposit, but not all of it. There was still a gap, a painful one. No one knew what to say. The excitement faded into quiet disappointment. Vera thanked everyone anyway. It was already more kindness than I ever expected. She smiled through tears. "I'll figure out the rest." She always said that, even when she didn't know how. That night, Michael sat alone in his office again. The building was silent, almost exactly like the night everything had begun. His eyes drifted toward the gray lunchbox resting inside his cabinet. He had kept it there ever since Vera forgot it. Not because he intended to, he simply never returned the paper inside. Carefully, he removed the folded budget sheet once more. This time, he turned it over. On the back, written in much smaller handwriting, was another sentence. One he had never noticed before. "One day, I'll buy Mom lunch instead." Michael read it again, then again. It wasn't about money. It was about hope. About a daughter who wanted, just once, to stop making her mother feel guilty for needing help. Michael slowly folded the paper. His decision became perfectly clear. The following morning, Vera was waiting for the bus outside her apartment when a black SUV pulled quietly to the curb. The passenger window lowered. Michael looked at her. "I'll drive you." She blinked. "To work?" "Not today." He opened the passenger door. "Please." She hesitated, then climbed inside. Neither of them spoke during the drive. Phoenix rolled quietly past the windows. After 20 minutes, Vera looked up. "This isn't the office." "No, it's the hospital." Her heart began to race. Michael parked, turned off the engine, reached into the back seat, and handed her a large sealed envelope. She looked at him in confusion. "I can't accept money." "I know. You won't find any." Her hands trembled as she opened the envelope. Inside wasn't a check, or cash. It was an official confirmation letter from Phoenix Memorial Hospital. Emergency medical deposit, paid in full. Below it, another document. Hayes Employee Emergency Relief Fund approved, fully funded. An anonymous donor had completed the remaining balance through the foundation established by the company's late founder. No employee rules had been broken. No personal gifts had been accepted. Everything had been done exactly the right way. Vera read the letter twice, then a third time. Her vision blurred. Tears spilled down her cheeks before she could stop them. She looked at Michael. "You knew." He nodded gently. "You weren't alone." That was all he said. Vera covered her face and began to cry. Not because someone had solved her problem, but because, for the first time in a very long time, she no longer had to carry it by herself. Later that afternoon, Michael returned to his office. For the first time in weeks, his shoulders felt lighter. His inbox, however, had other plans. A new email waited at the top of the screen. Subject: Executive Transfer Opportunity, New York Regional Headquarters. Michael's expression slowly changed. The board wanted him to relocate, immediately after the current quarter. He looked out the window toward the Arizona skyline. Just when life had finally begun to feel different, it seemed determined to ask another impossible question. Mrs. Carter's recovery was slow, but every week she walked a little farther, laughed a little louder, and complained a little more about hospital food. "The doctors saved my kidney," she sighed dramatically one afternoon. "But they still can't season mashed potatoes." Vera laughed. "That's a very specific complaint. It's an important one." For the first time in years, their apartment sounded like a home instead of a hospital room. Life slowly settled into a new rhythm. Vera no longer worked double shifts. She stayed at Hayes Logistics. Twice a week, after work, she volunteered at a community center that prepared free meals for families caring for seriously ill relatives. She never told anyone why. She simply smiled whenever someone thanked her. "Someone once helped me," she would say. "I'm only passing it on." A month later, the announcement finally became official. Michael would be transferring to New York. The entire office celebrated his promotion. Vera smiled with everyone else, then quietly returned to her desk. Neither of them spoke about it. Some feelings didn't need dramatic conversations. Sometimes, silence protected them better than words. On Michael's final afternoon in Arizona, most employees gathered for cake and photographs. Mr. Alvarez insisted on taking one blurry group picture. Nobody move. Everyone moved anyway. The picture was terrible. Everyone laughed. When the office had finally emptied, One last knock came at Michael's door. "Come in." Vera stepped inside, carrying something familiar, the gray lunchbox. She placed it gently on his desk. "I think this belongs to the person who changed its story." Michael looked at the lunchbox, then at her. A small smile appeared. "This time, am I allowed to open it?" Vera nodded. "Yes." He slowly unzipped it. Inside, half a turkey sandwich, one apple, one blueberry muffin, exactly like the night she had forgotten it. Except, there was no folded budget sheet, only a small handwritten card. Michael unfolded it. "You once saved my lunch. Thank you, for saving everything that came after." For several seconds, he simply stared at the words, then quietly folded the card. Instead of putting it back into the lunchbox, he slipped it inside his wallet. "I'll keep this." Vera smiled. "I hoped you would." There was nothing else to say. She turned toward the door. "So, I guess this is goodbye." Michael looked at her for a long moment, then answered softly, "I've learned not to use that word too quickly." 6 months passed. Spring returned to Arizona. The community center was busier than ever. Dozens of volunteers prepared sandwiches and packed lunchboxes for families spending long days at the hospital. Vera sealed one final lunchbox and smiled. "I think that's the last one." A familiar voice answered behind her. "Actually, I think you're missing one." She turned. A food truck had just parked outside. Michael stepped down. He looked a little more relaxed than before, less like a CEO, more like himself. In his hand was the same gray lunchbox. "I found an excuse to visit Phoenix," he said. "The board meeting only lasted an hour." Vera laughed. "You flew across the country for a 1-hour meeting?" "I did. And it was a very efficient meeting." She shook her head. "You still don't know how to tell jokes." "I'm improving. Very slowly." Both of them laughed. Michael handed her the lunchbox. "I think it's your turn." Vera slowly opened it. Inside, half a turkey sandwich, one apple, one blueberry muffin, and one folded note. She opened it carefully. "Lunch tastes better when you're not eating alone. Would you join me?" Vera looked up. There was no ring, no audience, no dramatic speech, just Michael. Standing there with the same quiet patience he had shown the night he first opened a forgotten lunchbox. She smiled through tears. "I'd like that." She reached for his hand. He held it gently, then nodded toward the line of waiting families. "After we finish serving dinner?" Vera smiled. "After we finish serving dinner." Still holding hands, they picked up 2 trays and walked back inside together. Children laughed. Paper lunchboxes were stacked neatly across the tables. The old gray lunchbox remained sitting quietly near the doorway. Once, it had carried a daughter's sacrifice. Now, it carried the beginning of 2 people's future. Because sometimes love doesn't begin with flowers, or diamonds, or perfect timing. Sometimes it begins with someone choosing not to throw away your lunch. One ordinary day, you accidentally leave your lunch behind, and the person who finds it quietly changes the course of your life. Do you believe love is something we find by chance, or something built through countless small acts of kindness? Share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear your story. If this story reminded you that kindness is sometimes the greatest form of love, then perhaps the biggest lesson isn't about money at all. Don't forget to subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories and join us for another journey next time. Sometimes, the people who need help the most are the ones trying hardest not to ask for it. A forgotten lunchbox, a quiet act of generosity, a stranger who chose to care. Those small moments changed 2 lives forever.